Hi guys, welcome back. This is part 11 of our Unreal Engine 4 inventory system series of videos. In this video we're going to have a look at setting up the implementation for the use item button within our item menu sort of panel here. One thing that I want to clear up before we move on is within the item data structure I added the amount to use variable within here. We can actually delete this because we don't need it in here. So we will have an amount to use, but it doesn't need to be set as part of the item structure. It will be something that we work out through calculation within the blueprint. So we're just going to delete that from the structure and save it. But what you will need to do is basically recompile all blueprints that require it. You'll have to kind of go through and just very quickly remove any instances of that variable being added on your sort of make and break item data structure nodes. All you need to do really is just right click and remove one of them, and that will kind of sort it out. So you'll have to do that on your inventory widget blueprint. You'll have to do it in the first person character blueprint. If you just press compile, it usually tells you kind of where the instances are. So the amount to use, we don't need that one there, so we can break link to that one. We can get oh, that one's looks like it's almost completely broken, that one. Let's just rebuild that one. So if we break item or get item data, get item data, and let's just split that struct pin, and we'll just have to rehook that up, but it'll only take a couple of seconds to do that. So I do apologize, that was my mistake. I forgot that we didn't need it on that one. So yeah, just have a look for any other instances. For some of them you might just have to remove the one that you don't need. Just keep pressing compile until you get the all clear. So that's all good from there. We'll need to do it from the game instance as well, just to recompile that as well. And you can always run a test play and it'll tell you kind of where there are uncompiled or compile errors. So just make sure that you sort of remove. So if we break that link there, we don't need that anymore. And let's have a look inside here as well. The amount to use, we won't need that either. So we can get rid of that from there. And from the ammo pack, we don't need that either, the amount to use, and we can get rid of that amount to use from there as well. So just a little bit of tidy up, which is that is my mistake. So once that's all done, let's head back over to the inventory widget blueprint. So we're going to build in the functionality for using the item. A couple of things to note. I've mentioned a few times that the inventory that we have is purely a data-only inventory. It's an array of data structures, so those items don't actually exist anywhere in the game. So to be able to use any functionality, we'll have to basically spawn the actor back into the level. So it's a very simple process, but just to kind of make you aware that because even though we have a health pickup here where we'll include all of the code, we can't just tell it to run from the class. We have to run from an instance or an object of that class. So when we start building the functionality for the use button, that's why we'll have the spawn actor from class. One other thing that we're going to create is to be able to communicate between the inventory and the pickup itself. We're going to use another method of communication between blueprints, and that is the blueprint interface. So what we're going to do is inside the inventory folder, we're going to right click and we're going to go to blueprints and blueprint interface. And we're just going to call this one inventory and I'm going to call it BPI, so inventory BPI. BPI for blueprint interface. So if we double click on this, you'll open up the interface editor. What you'll notice is it's kind of similar to your regular blueprints. The main difference being that we can't actually build any code in here. The idea of an interface is that it's names of functions only without any implementation. So you implement an interface on one blueprint, you implement the same interface on another blueprint, and when you call the interface from the first blueprint, you can kind of run the code in the second, but you can run it in your own way. And this makes sense for an inventory because we can basically have one interface call for use item, and all of the items within your game can use that use item event in their own way. So if it's a health pack, your use item would heal the player. If it's an ammo pack, your use item would reload the gun. So we're going to start by just renaming this function, and we're just going to call it use item. Now this is where that amount to use comes back into play. Rather than having it on the blueprint structure, the item data structure, we're actually going to include the amount to use as a variable, an input from the on the use item function. So we're going to go to the inputs here, and we're just going to create a new variable called amount to use as an input, and we'll make sure that it is an integer because we want to know how much we're using from our inventory. So just compile and save that, and before we can use this interface, we have to actually implement it inside our blueprints. So we're going to start by going to the inventory widget blueprint, and we're going to hit class settings, and you'll see on the left hand side down here in the details, you'll have your implemented interfaces. At the minute there's none, so we need to add our inventory BPI, compile and save. And we're going to go to our blueprints for our health pickup and our ammo pickup, and we're going to do the same thing, class settings, and just add the inventory blueprint interface to your implemented interfaces. Again, compile and save, and let's have a look at getting this started within the inventory. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is grab our use button to get the event for onClicked. So when we click the use button, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have to spawn actor from class, and this is so that we can basically get the class of the item within the inventory array index, and that we can use its functionality. So we're going to have to grab our game instance. We're going to get the inventory, and we're going to run a get reference function, and the array index that we want is the slot that was clicked. So from here, from the get, we're going to break item data as we normally do, and for the spawn actor, what we're going to do is we're going to use the pickup class as the class that we're going to spawn. Now, even though we are spawning essentially an empty blueprint, we still need to tell it where we want to spawn. Remember, there's no visual representation of this blueprint. Our health pickup doesn't have any visual look to it, but we still need to tell the spawn actor from class where it is that we actually want it to spawn. So from spawn transform, we're just going to click and we're just going to make transform, and we're just going to leave all of these blank. This is something that you may want to come back and have a look at for future additions to your inventory. Let's say rather than use item to kind of get rid of it from your inventory, you may want to equip an item. The transform, rather than using these default values here. It may be that to equip a sword to a character, you may want to equip it in the hand or into a sheath on the character's back, something like that. For the purposes of this, we're just going to use some empty values. So we've spawned the actor, and the next thing to do is to check its stackability. So we're going to run this into a branch. There we go, and just going to move this little redirect node down here. So similar to other checks that we've done for items that stack or not, we're doing this basically to check how are we going to implement that amount to use functionality. So if the item is not stackable, then what we'll want to do is from the false branch, we're just going to basically run our call use item to actually use it. Now you can see that there is an amount to use to feed in. Because we're using this for singular items, we don't actually need to call to actually add anything in here into the amount to use, because we're going to remove the item from the inventory anyway. So we're going to say use item. We're going to say refresh inventory, and we're going to call action complete. So that will be enough pretty much. In fact, actually we need to actually remove it from the array as well. So we're going to basically use the same functionality here when we removed it by tossing. We're not going to copy paste it, we'll build it again from scratch. So we need to get the game instance, we need to get the inventory, and we're going to use the remove function, remove index. So we're going to remove the index, and we need to tell it which index is it that we're going to remove. It's going to be the slot clicked. There we go. So that will be enough to get this to get a non-stackable item used and removed from the index, from the array. So what we'll do is we will we'll set up the health pickup here, and we'll test it to see if we can get this to work. So if we jump back over into the health pickup and just jump into the event graph, we're going to want to firstly run a begin play, and we're going to cast to the first person character because this is where I stored my health variable. So get player character, and as the first person character we'll just promote it to a variable so that we have it here. Okay, so because we implemented the blueprint interface, we can now use the event use item, which is from the inventory blueprint. So when we press the button in the actual inventory, when we press that button, we will call this use item through the interface, and we'll pick that up through the use item. We'll know that we're using the item in this class because we set the class to be this pickup class here. We do need to actually, one step that I did forget to do, we do need to actually set the target here for which item it is that we're going to use. So just before this branch here, we'll promote this to a variable so that we have the spawned item, and the spawn item is where we're going to use the inventory. No, not that one. We're going to spawn item, we're going to use item message. There we go. So we need to make sure we're using the correct use item call. That's my mistake. I do apologize. So spawn item, and we're going to call the use item functionality from that spawned actor. So just compile that there. There we go. So in the health pickup, we're calling the event use item. We don't have anything to pull out of the amount to use because we didn't feed anything into it. What we are going to do though is get the player's health. So we need to grab the player. We need to get health. And we're also going to set health. And just as a little check as well, what we'll do is we will do a simple test. So if we say that health plus, let's say 10% will add back onto the health with this health pack. If we add 10%, is that greater than 1, which is the full health? If that's true, so if we run this through a branch, if that's true, then what we want to do is, for health, we want to set the health to be the maximum health, so we're going to set it to 1. If it's false, however, we'll still want to set health, but we'll set the health as being the health plus that 0.1. So if we have, let's say for instance, we have 90% of our health, if we had 85% health, if we add 0.1 to that, so 0.85 plus 0.1 will give us 0.95. That's going to be less than 1 still, so we just set the health as being whatever the result of that little calculation was. If we had 0.95 health, then the value of this health plus 0.1 would be greater than 1. So we just set the health to be whatever the maximum health is. Now I've hard-coded values here. This is an opportunity for you to use your own variables that you might set up that might have store different values for the health or the amount to add. If you might have a variable for your maximum health in case your maximum health changes. You might have a variable for the amount to add down here. If you could grab that from the actual inventory item data. We could have an amount to add to there. There's loads of different ways you could do this. For the purpose of this, though, I'm just going to hard code the values in. So once we've set this, we need to destroy actor, and destroy actor, the item to be destroyed is just going to be ourselves. So it's going to be this health pickup we'll destroy once we've done this. So let's compile that and save that, and let's give this a little bit of a test to see if this works. So we have our health progress bar going down rather slowly, I might add. So we'll just have a bit of a wander around, just wait for it to go down a little bit, and in the meantime we will press the E key to pick up our health pack. So we have our inventory open, we've got our health down by a certain amount. If we press our health pack now to open up the menu, if we press heal me, what you'll see is that the health went up by the 10% and it removed the item from the inventory. If we press I and go back to the game, you'll see that there is no instance of the health pack anywhere. So yeah, that works great. So let's have a look at how we can get the stackable items to work the way that we want. There is going to be a little bit of calculation involved in this. So let's jump back into the inventory widget blueprint, and we're going to have a look from the true branch here. So what we want to do firstly is we want to perform a check to see how much well, firstly, what is the actual item that we've picked up, and what is the current quantity of that item. So if we go to true here, what we want to do is we want to not create a macro like that, we want to perform a switch. So we're going to switch on pickup type, And what we'll do is we'll right click this and we're just going to press collapse nodes because we want to have a nice tidy graph here. So we're going to call this one set amount to use. So the set amount to use, we're going to add some inputs to this graph here. So over on the left hand side, we want to have, firstly, we want to know what the pickup item actually is. So pickup item. And that's going to be of type pickup type. In fact, we'll actually make that called pickup type just to make it a little less ambiguous. So pickup type is going to be the pickup type of the object that we've used from the inventory. So we can hook that up right from over here. We also want to know what the initial quantity is. So we're going to have a property for quantity as well. So let's just create that as an integer. And the quantity is going to be whatever the current quantity of the item that we've picked up is. So we'll hook that in from over here as well. So let's jump inside the graph and let's have a look and see what it is that we actually want to do here. Well, firstly, we want to hook in the pickup type to the selection so that we can switch between different ones. Now, the health pack, we don't actually need to set up anything for. So we're going to leave that output path blank because we don't need to set the amount to use for that. We are going to require a amount to use variable which will store based on the amount that we want to actually use. So what we'll do is, firstly, on the left hand side, we're going to create a new variable. We're going to call this one amount to use. And we're going to store this as an integer type. Okay, so in terms of the calculation that we're going to use, because we're doing this for the ammo pack, we're going to get the game instance first, and we need to figure out what the current ammo count is and what the maximum ammo count is. So let's get the max ammo as well. So to work out how much ammo we're going to use, we firstly need to know what we currently have and what the maximum amount is. If we have enough in our inventory to replenish the ammo back to full, but have some left over, then we won't have to use the entire quantity. To work out how much we actually need to add, we can simply minus the current ammo from the maximum ammo. So we're going to just wire those both into there. And what we'll do with this is we'll actually promote this to its own variable, which we'll call amount required. So irrespective of what our quantity is, we will always have an amount which will be required. So just again, to keep things nice and tidy, we're going to collapse these nodes again inside here, and this is going to be set ammo amount to use. So what we'll need from this is an input for our quantity, because we need to apply the quantity into here. So we can feed the quantity into this graph as well. So let's open up the graph for the ammo. So we've worked out the amount required. The next thing to do is to do a check to say, is the amount required greater than the actual quantity that we have in our inventory. So it could be that we only have 10 in our quantity, but we actually need 20. If we don't have enough, then we're going to use basically everything that we have. If we have more, so if the quantity is greater than the amount required, then we only need to use what the amount required actually is. So we're going to from the quantity, we're going to get a integer is greater than. We want to hook this actually into the bottom one, and we're going to use the amount required as the top value. So we're going to check, is the amount required greater than the amount that we already have in our inventory. So this is a conditional, so let's just run it into a branch. And what we're saying is, if the amount is greater, then what we'll need to do is, from the true branch, is we're going to set the amount to use. And the amount to use is simply going to be the current quantity. So if we have 10, but we need 20 to replenish our maximum ammo, then we don't have enough, so we're just going to use the entire quantity. If we don't have, if we have too much in our quantity, so if we have, let's say we have 30, but we only require 7, then the amount to use is simply going to be the amount that is required. There we go. So just to get this all executed up for our outputs, we're going to add in a new execution pin, which we'll call then. We're going to hook up the outputs of these into the output there. We're going to go back up one on the breadcrumb trail to set amount used. Again, with the outputs here, we'll add in an execution pin, which we'll call then, and we'll hook that up into there. So at the minute, this is looking quite bare, but remember that the different types of pickup you'll have, you may have different stackable items in here. You would want to have a different case for each of those to specify that amount. So we can now go back up to the event graph, and the result of this node here will allow us to plug in to the amount required on the use item. So what we're going to do after this is basically call our well, we need to know now what we can remove from the array. So we're going to grab our game instance inventory and slot clicked here. We're just going to Control W to get a copy of those. And what we're going to do from the set amount to use, we're going to set array lm. So we're going to run this here because we need to know if we're going to remove some from the quantity that we have, how many do we want to have left in that quantity field. So this is going to be, again, sort of similar to the toss function here. We're going to basically break the current item data and make the current item data, and then feed this into our array element. So we're going to need, again, another copy of this here. So we're just going to duplicate these here. We are going to get a reference. And in fact, actually, we can just use that one there. So slot clicked. There we go. This can go over here because we know that the inventory that we want is going to be this one, and the index again is going to be the slot clicked. So we can copy this over here. There we go. And now it's just going to be a matter of breaking our item data here and remaking the item data over here, so that we can feed in the new item amounts into there. So we can hook everything across as before. The only difference will be that the quantity is now going to be the quantity as it is minus the amount to use that we've specified within our set amount to use collapsed graph here. So amount to use is then going to go into the quantity. that can now, this new item, updated item, can now be fed into the item here. Okay, so the last thing to really do is to do a check to see if what we've used, however many we've used, is that going to leave us with some in the inventory, or can we remove the item from remove the item's index from the array? So we need to firstly actually call this item. So we're going to use call the use item from the inventory blueprint interface. There we go. The amount to use is just going to be the amount to use that we specified from before. And then what we'll do is, after we've used it, we'll just perform a conditional check. So the conditional check is going to be if the quantity of this here is going to be, oh, sorry, my mouse went a little bit funny there. If the quantity of this is going to be equal to or less than 0, if this is true, then we can just remove the item from the inventory. So I'm just going to pull this down here a little bit. We're going to remove the true from into here, remove from index. So let's just tidy up that little cable there a bit. So maybe about there. Bit fiddly, these ones. There we go. So remove that into the index there. And if it's false, so if it's not equal or less than 0, then we just need to actually refresh the inventory. So we can hook this one down to here. So we're going to have a couple of overlapping wires, not too bad though. About there, and for this side, plug this into there. Cool. Okay then. So what we'll have a look at, well, just to recap a little bit what we've done, because there's quite a lot of complicated stuff going on here. We're going to say we click the use button, and the use button, we spawn an actor from class because we need to spawn the pickup that we want to use. So we're spawning the pickup class from the inventory array index that was clicked. We promote this to its own variable, which we call spawn item, and we then do a conditional check to say if that spawn item was a stackable item. If it was not a stackable item, we simply run or call the use item inventory blueprint interface function, which will fire off a message to the corresponding class and perform the function that it needs to do. Because it was a single item, we just simply remove it from the array. We remove the index that was clicked, we refresh the inventory, and we call the action complete function to run the action complete event, which resets all of our menus. If we pick up another item, if we use another item, and we see that this one is actually a stackable item, then we first need to work out how many do we actually want to use. Now, in terms of this, the way that I've set this up is that we've got a collapse graph where we input the pickup and quantity types from the inventory structure data. We switch the quantity to use based on the pickup type. So you could have a whole range of different factors here, different item types. You could have magic or coins or whatever. I'm just doing this with ammo pack. And the way that we've calculated how much ammo we need to use is that we have the maximum ammo minus the current ammo gives us our required ammo to use. We then do a check to say, is the required amount greater than the amount that we hold in our inventory? If that's true, then the amount to use is just the full quantity that we want to use. If it's false, then the amount to use is simply the amount that's required. So that sets that variable there for amount to use. Back up in the event graph, we then set array element for the index that was clicked within the inventory. And what that simply does is it minuses the amount to use from the current quantity. So we do that here, we set the array element, and then we call the item use item function from the inventory blueprint. The difference here being that because it's not a single item like this one, we actually feed in an amount to use. So the amount to use gets fed into here. This then goes into another conditional check where we check if the quantity that we have in our inventory array index, if that quantity is going to be less than or equal to 0, if that's true, then we just remove the index from the array, because there's no point in having an array index taking up a full slot in the inventory if the amount is equal to 0. So we remove it from the index, then we refresh the inventory. If it's false, so if it is greater than 0, then that means we've still got some quantity left in the array. So we don't want to remove it, we just want to simply refresh the inventory and then call the action complete. So if we compile and save this, before we test it with a stackable item, we need to configure the stackable items actual functionality to implement. So let's open up the ammo pickup. We need to perform the same check as before. We need to say in the class settings that we want to implement the inventory blueprint. So let's compile that. At event begin play, because our ammo count's been stored in the game instance, we want to get access to the game instance. So cast to my game instance and get game instance here. Okay, so as my game instance, we'll promote this to its own variable, which we'll call this game instance. And because we've implemented the interface, we can now use our event use item. There we go. So event use item, what we want to do is the game instance, we want to get the current ammo, and we want to set current ammo. Now there's nothing that we there's no checks that we need to do here in terms of whether we're going to go over the maximum ammo count, because all of those checks were already done here in terms of our setting amount to use. So unlike the health pickup where we had to check whether we were going to be exceeding the maximum health amount, we don't need to do that check in here because it's already been done within the inventory blueprint as well. So all we're doing simply is we're getting the current ammo count and we're going to add the amount to use and set the current ammo. What we can also do is, because we have a sound effect, we can play some sound as well. So we're going to use the reload gun sound. And once we're happy that everything has been done, we will destroy this actor. So the spawned instance of the ammo pickup, we'll get rid of it because we don't need it from the level. So let's compile that and save that as well. And let's give this a test to see if it works. So I'm in the game. I'm going to go over to my pickups. I'm going to pick up the ammo that I need. I'm going to shoot a few times. So I've now got 35 out of 50. So the amount required to get me back up to the full amount is going to be 15. So if I open up my inventory and I go to my ammo pack and I say reload, what I'm expecting to have is an ammo count of 50 up here and a resulting count here of 45. So if we just say reload item, we can see that that works perfectly. We have the 50 for our full item, for our full ammo reload, and we have the 45 remaining inside the ammo pack. So just to check the other element as well, if we just get enough, well, use some ammo so that we have, let's say we need 10 to reload fully. Let's just go to our ammo pack, just to make it a bit easy to test this. Let's just toss 35, 36. Let's say 37. So if we toss 37, we now only have 8 ammo left within our inventory. But we need 10 to actually replenish the full ammo count. So what we're expecting here is that the ammo will go up to 48, and we'll remove this from the index because we'll have used the full amount. So if we say reload, we now have 48 in our ammo count, and we've used the last of the ammo. So that's been removed from the inventory. So that wraps that up, and that also wraps up our inventory series. So throughout the process of the last video, the last 12 or so videos that we've made, we've gone through creating the visual look of the inventory itself. We've had a look at using various blueprint assets, such as data structures, enumeration, blueprint interfaces. We've done communication between blueprints in a variety of ways, including casting, event dispatchers, all sorts of stuff like that. And yeah, we now have a fully working inventory system. So what I would say going from here is be imaginative, think about what sorts of pickups you might want to use, and how they may be implemented within your game. Thanks very much for watching, guys.